of Amnon. Who is Amnon? He is David's oldest son. Okay, he is a half-brother to Tamar, right?
Yep.
And he is the half-brother of Tamar's brother, who is who? Absalom, yes. True or false? Absalom took matters into his own hands and dealt with Amnon. What did he do to him? Yes, he had him killed by his servants, didn't he? And after he had him killed, Absalom immediately goes back to Jerusalem, and everything is wonderful. No. Absalom flees into another part of the country, and who does he go to? Does anybody remember who he goes to? Yes, he goes to his grandfather, who is of a completely different group of people. Okay, he flees to his grandfather, his mother's father. Okay, so that's kind of where we ended up at the end of our last lesson. And now we're in chapter 14, and I've entitled this first section, The Request of the Woman of Tekoa. The Request of the Woman of Tekoa. We divided the section into 3 different sections. Who has an outline for us? Anybody? All right, there you go for it. Point number 1.
Plan of deceit devised.
All right, plan of deceit devised. Number 2.
The king pledges his support.
Okay, the king pledges his support. Number 3. You can't read his writing. That's not the third point.
Woman of Tekoa continues to reason with the king.
The woman of Tekoa continues to reason with the king. Very good. I've got 3 points. Number 1, Joab contacted the woman of Tekoa. Number 2, the woman completes Joab's mission. And number 3, the woman confronts David about Absalom. Okay, very, very interesting. Let's just start with our questions, and we'll go through this and see how the story goes. True or false? Joab perceived that the king's heart was toward Absalom. True. Now, Joab, the son of Zeruiah, perceived that the king's heart was toward Joab. What does that little word perceived mean? It says Joab perceived that his heart was toward Joab. Alerted to, he could see it. Okay, anybody else? Was it kind of like an intuition? Yes, Strong says very simply this: to know, to observe, to recognize. Brown, Driver, and Briggs: to know, to perceive and see, to find out and recognize. Now notice that the how of his perception is not revealed, is it? All it says is that he perceived that David's heart was toward Absalom. It may have been through discussions with the king. Who is Joab? Yeah, folks, he's the commander of David's forces, is he not? Does the commander and the king have discussions one with another? Sure, they're going to have many discussions one with another. So it may have been through those discussions that he learned that. It may have come through the words of David's servants, mightn't it? You know, David's servants are constantly around him, listening, hearing all the family ideas. And if you don't think that there are grapevines everywhere, there are, aren't there? And stuff gets spread everywhere. So maybe some of the servants had revealed some information to Joab. Could it have been that Absalom's mother revealed some things to Joab? Who is Absalom's mother? David's wife. Isn't that right? It's David's wife. Okay, so maybe, just maybe, David and Micaiah had some conversations, and then Micaiah reports those conversations to Joab. So there may have been many ways that he learned that. Now, here's the interesting thing. Okay, the text says the king's heart was toward Joab. Let me ask you something. When you hear that, what immediately comes to your mind with no research? His heart was toward Absalom. When you hear that, what do you think? He what? What do you mean? Okay. Okay, so he's in a line with Absalom. Absalom is a favorite of his, and so there's this heart of love, this heart of compassion, this heart of tenderness, this heart of acceptance toward Absalom. Okay? Now let me read you another quote. Others believe that it means that his heart was against Absalom. When Joab perceived that the king's heart was against Absalom, he sent for a cunning woman from Tekoa to work upon the king and change his mind so that he might grant forgiveness to Absalom. That comes from Kyle and DeLitch and their commentary. His heart was toward Absalom. Okay, in other words, he had this evil, angry heart toward Absalom for what he had done. Okay? And now, is there any thing in the text that might indicate that is the truth? There's only one if you really study the text. And folks, it is length of time Absalom's been gone. If David was toward Absalom, if he was yearning for Absalom, if he was wanting Absalom to come home, if he missed Absalom, if he had this heart of compassion toward Absalom, why didn't he just what? Why didn't he just go get him and say, hey man, I understand what you went through. I realize that was your sister. I feel kind of the same way. Just come on back. Everything will be fine. Well, guess what? Absalom's still where? He's still in hiding with his granddad. Why? Because David's heart was toward Absalom. Okay? What?
Well, if he wanted to, punish him, he would have sent some forces after him long before.
Well, he's got a problem though. Who's he with? Okay, and what is his grandfather? Yeah, but what is his grandfather? His grandfather is a king of Geshur. He's a king. Okay? And so if David goes and tries to get Absalom, what could start up? A warfare could start up between the two kingdoms. And so maybe David doesn't want to do that. And Absalom's away. He's gone. I'm not worried about him, but I'm still what? I'm still upset with the boy. Okay, now we're also going to have David's reaction in a little while when he finally grants Absalom to come back. Does anybody remember what he tells him to do? Don't you dare come to see me. Well, now that's a loving father. That's a father that cherishes his child. That's a father that, ooh, I forgive you. I understand. Don't you dare come to my face. And guess how long that lasts? 2 more years. Folks, we got about a 5-year period here that David wants nothing to do with Absalom. He is upset at what Absalom has done, okay? Larry? Some of the servants had revealed some information to Joab. Could it have been that Absalom's mother revealed some things to Joab? Oh yes, see this is where David has got problems, doesn't he? David's got a kid problem. Isn't that right? There are parents who get so sucked up into their children that the children become the bosses, don't they? Here's Amnon, who has killed somebody, and David is very angry, the text says. He was very wroth, and we don't read of anything being done. Okay? And now we have Absalom, who takes revenge, and yet, in the process of time, David is going to embrace Absalom all over again, and even overly so, even when Absalom, as we mentioned in our lesson this morning, tries to overthrow the kingdom. He's still got this heart of compassion and this, deep love. And it's going to happen to a third child as well. Okay? So David's got some issues with kiddos, okay? Who did Joab contact in Tekoa? Ah, yes, and Joab sent to Tekoa and fetched from thence a wise woman. Man, a wise woman. Tekoa. Folks, Tekoa was located in Judah. It was located about 6 miles east of Jerusalem on a range of hills that stretched all the way through Hebron. Okay, so we don't know who the woman's name is, do we? She's just a woman of Tekoa, but we know that she was what? A wise woman. Okay? Do you have any questions about this woman? Oh, man. I want to know this woman, don't you? You know, if we were in the world today, I'd be saying, what's her name so I can look her up on Facebook? Okay? You know, isn't that what we do? You find out a name, you go look them up on Facebook. Who is this woman of Tekoa? Okay? And she's a wise woman. What does that mean? Okay? You know, in what way was she wise? You know, but one that Joab what? Is going to put a lot of trust in, isn't he? Okay. How did Joab want this woman to act? Ah, yes. He wanted her to act like one that was mourning for the dead. And said unto her, I pray thee, feign thyself to be a mourner. Now listen to this. And put on now mourning apparel, and anoint not thyself with oil. Don't put on any perfume. Don't want you smelling good. Okay, when you go in there. But be a woman that had a long time mourned for the dead. Folks, there were individuals who would mourn a week, 2 weeks, put on sackcloth and ashes and just sit out and do absolutely nothing but mourn and weep and cry. No eating, no bathing, no nothing. Okay? And so when you saw this individual, you knew from their countenance, you knew from their clothing, and from their possible smell that they had been in deep mourning, folks. Okay? Because see, if you went in and you'd taken a bath, even though you looked the part outside, King go, you don't smell like a what? You don't smell like a mourner. You took a bath this morning. Okay? So he wants her to play the part to the hilt. Okay? And that she does. To whom did he want this woman to speak? Yes, and come to the king and speak on this manner to him. Now I want you to think about that. Joab wants this woman to go speak to who? The king. I call it Beth. Beth, come here. I need you to dress up like a mourner. And I want you to go talk to Trump for me. Now let me ask you something. Is she going to get in there? Fine. She says, fine. Off she goes. She flies to Washington. She goes up there. She knocks. Well, she don't even get to the door of the White House. Does she? She probably going to look at me and say, you crazy. Now, there's some way that a door is going to be opened to whom? To the king. Who do you think facilitated that? Joab. You know it, folks? He's the commander of the forces, right? Joab's got some pull here, okay? I want you to go talk to the king. She didn't say, well, I don't even know the king. Did she? Or, that's impossible for me to do that. Nope. Okay, he's going to open some doors to get this woman in where she needs to go. So, blank, put the blank in her mouth. Oh, yes. So, Joab put the words in her mouth. In other words, the words of what? The words of what she was supposed to say to this king when she gets there. Okay? Now remember, she's a what? She's a wise woman. Okay? And so she knows that I better do exactly what Joab wants me to do, doesn't she? She is a good con artist, she says. Yes, I won't finish that sentence. True or false? David would not receive the woman. False. And when the woman of Tekoa spake unto the king, somehow she got access to David, didn't she? Okay. Now let me ask you something. What is one of a king's responsibilities? Does anybody know? One of the king's responsibilities. What's that? Yes. He is a judge of the people. Okay, so there were some matters that would come before the king that he would be responsible for and he would have to judge. And you think it may have been that Joab somehow set this up and said, I know this woman in Tekoa, and she's got a horrible situation, and she really needs you to judge this matter. And she's somebody that I care about, somebody that I think needs some type of relief in this situation. Very well could have happened, couldn't it? And so the woman gets free, easy access to David, the king. What was the woman's first action and first words to David? She fell on her face and did obeisance and said what? Help, O king. Wow. Now remember, what does she look like when she enters into his presence? She looks like a mourner. Now just think, she walks right into the king's throne room, and the first thing she does, she falls on her face flat before him. He's seeing that she's a mourner. They had mourning clothes back in those days. You knew when somebody was a leper, when they were a mourner, when they were a harlot, whatever it is, right? We used to have Sunday go to meeting clothes, didn't we? And you knew. And still today, when I go out after we've worshiped here and I go to a restaurant, you know what some people tell me? Oh, you've been to church this morning? You see, you dress up, people still think what? That's the way you go to church. Okay, now we've kind of fallen off of that in some respects. But he would know she's a mourner, and so the first thing she does is what? She falls before the king. What does that show? Reverence, respect, awe. Right? For the king. She appreciates his position. So she immediately is befriending this king, isn't she? Here she is, she's a mourner, and now she's very respectful. And then what does she say? 3 things. Help, O king. Wouldn't you have liked to have heard how she said that? The Bible doesn't say how she said. Was it a whisper? Now you don't know that. Beverly said, no, it wasn't a whisper. I said, she don't know that. It may have been a whisper. It may have been a relatively loud cry, mightn't it? Okay, but it was something that would do what? Oh yeah, folks, here is a woman, a mourner, who is respectful to a king, and what does she beg for? She begs for help. You show me any man who won't help a woman who is in that situation begging for help. And women know that. Now, one woman in here who denied it. You laughed, but you didn't deny it. Okay? Men got a soft heart for women who need help. Oh yes, they all know what they're doing here, Now watch this. How did the woman first describe herself to the king? Uh-oh. And the king said unto her, what aileth thee? And she answered, I am indeed a widow, and mine husband is what? Dead. Now, was that the main reason she was there? No. She had 2 boys she needed to talk about. But the first thing she does to describe herself is what? I am a widow. Now you got what? Now you got more reason to help her. Folks, were widows well respected in Israel? Did God expect Israel to take care of their widows? Yes. You go back and you just run the references in the Old Testament about widows. And folks, God's heart pours out to widows. Okay? And He wants widows helped. And guess what? David as a king would know that. Okay? So now she's a woman, she's mourning, she's respectful, she needs help, and she's what? She's a widow. David has to help her. Doesn't he? I mean, just about. I mean, this is the perfect situation that they've set up for him. Exodus 22:2 says this, ye shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. That's pretty blatant, isn't it? No widow or fatherless child. That was under the Old Testament. Deuteronomy 10:18 says this, He, that's God, doth execute the judgment of the fatherless and widow. Those widows were very important in Israel and were not to be mistreated. How many sons did this widow have? 2 sons. And thy handmaid had 2 sons. What happened between them? Yeah, a little brotherly scuffle, you know. I just thank the Lord some of my scuffles with my brother and sister didn't turn out as bad as this one did. A couple of them, they almost did, didn't they? And they strove together in the field, and there was none to part them. But the one smote the other and slew him. Man. Hey. Oh, man. I want to know this woman, don't you? Sometimes it happens. If we were in the world today, there's been many times family members have killed family members, haven't there? You know, Genesis chapter 4, we got 2 brothers, don't we? And so it happens. It's a live situation, okay? Now notice this, folks. This is supposed to be similar to what has happened between Amnon and Absalom. Okay, 2 brothers, right? And one of them is what? Dead. Slain by the other one. Okay, so she's setting up this story to suck David in. Now, the 2 stories are not identical in nature. Okay, they can't be identical in nature or David would what? Yeah, he'd figure it out real quick, right? She doesn't want him figuring out real quick, but she does want to introduce the situation. I had 2 sons. David had 2 sons. They strove together, did they not? And one killed the other. Okay, even though the situations were somewhat different. What did the family want to do to the son who had smote his brother? Yes, execute him, kill him. And behold, the whole family is risen against thine handmaid. And they said, deliver him that smote his brother, that we may kill him for the life of his brother whom he slew. And we will destroy the heir also. Oh, man. Now, I find it interesting that she says, my family wants to kill my son that's still alive. And they are saying, we're going to slay him. But how do they describe it? And the what? Heir also. Okay, meaning what? He's the only other son. Okay, now remember, she's a what? She's a widow. Her husband is dead, right? If she has no children, does that create a problem with regard to the transmission of the inheritance? Especially the land. Yes, and folks, this was a big deal in Israel. Okay? The transmission of your inheritance was a huge deal. And if you had a son, you wanted that son to get what the father had, to keep the name of the husband alive. Okay? So she just throws in there, and we will destroy the heir also. Okay? So she really presents this family as pretty bad, doesn't it? They don't just want to kill the son. They want to get rid of what? The heir. Oh, man. Pretty wicked. I put down here, this account differed, no doubt, from the case of Absalom, inasmuch as his case, no murder had taken place in the heat of a quarrel, and no avenger of blood demanded his death. So that the only resemblance was, in fact, that there existed an intention to punish the murderer. Okay? Who wanted to do that? Remember a while ago, his heart was toward Absalom. Okay? If David ever had a way, if he ever figured out a good plan, if he ever, if he ever got in the, presence of Absalom again, what might happen? He may have had it in his mind. We'll just take Absalom's life. Okay? And Joab had learned this. Okay? He had perceived this. And so now Joab's trying to come up with a plan to do away with that, right? And so he's working this plan pretty hard. If the living son were killed, what would result? Yes. And so shall they quench my coal, which is left. We don't talk like that, do we? You know? Guess who my coal is? C-O-A-L. It's my son, Michael. He's my coal, right? He's the one that's going to what? Keep my fire alive. right? Guess what a coal can do? Can a coal keep things burning? Oh, yes. Okay, as long as you've got a good hot coal, things can keep burning, can't they? Okay, so as long as I've got a son, as long as I've got somebody, then my heir and my legacy can continue. But if you kill him, you're going to what? You're going to quench my coal. Okay? And shall not leave to my husband neither name nor remainder upon the earth. So guess what? The name comes to an end, doesn't it? My dad had a boy, a girl, and a boy. So he was good from the start, right? I come along, and what do I have? 2 girls, finally, a boy. My son comes along. 2 girls, finally, a boy. Now, I find it interesting that every time when you finally get the boy, you know what you do? Whew, good, okay? So we're good now, as long as Noah can stay alive. We're good now for 80 more years with the Eskew name on my daddy's side, right? Okay? And is that something that you kind of pride yourself on? You know, and you hope happens that your name continues? And see, this woman is playing on David's manly instincts, right? No father, no son, no legacy, no name, no inheritance. Folks, she is just appealing to everything you can appeal to get David on her side. Okay? Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I think I mentioned there's a book, I believe it's called The 5 Love Languages or something like that. I'd have to get, that may be the wrong book. But in the book, they teach you how to tell stories to people that you're in conflict with. Okay? You develop a good story. Maybe you write it in a letter. Maybe you call them and tell them the story. But the story resembles the problem that's between you. Okay? But what the story does, it sucks the individual in so that by the time you get to the end of it, guess what? Now they're right in the middle of it. And they're going, now I can't get out of it. Right? Now just think about that. Does David have this woman on her side right now? Yeah. She's a woman, she's in distress, she's distraught, she's a widow, and her family wants to kill her son, and if she kills his son, guess what? No coal, no air. Oh, folks, David is sucked in. You know? Because you see, who is the one who is opposed to Absalom? David. If that text means his heart was toward Absalom, David's one of those family members. Wanting to get rid of who? Wanting to get rid of the son, wanting to get rid of the heir. So David is being sucked into this thing by this woman. She's pretty smart, and Joab's pretty smart, isn't he? I wonder how much she got paid. How did David first answer the woman? Yeah, listen to this. And guys, from this point in the next 2 or 3 verses, this text gets hard, okay, for me to understand everything that's going on, okay? And the king said unto the woman, Go to thine house, and I will give charge concerning thee. When I read that, here's the way I took that at first, okay? You go into your house, right? I've heard the case. Now you go back to your house, and at some point, I'll do what? I'll give you an answer to this particular case. Okay? Do cases have to be settled immediately? No. And you go before a king, if he wants to put you off for a while, let me think about this. Okay? And in a little bit of time down the road, I'll give you an answer to this particular problem. Okay? What did the woman assure David of if he would judge the matter? And the woman of Tekoa said unto the king, My lord, O king, the iniquity be on me and on my father's house, and the king and his throne be what? Guiltless. I'm wondering if David is struggling with how he's supposed to deal with this. Okay? And the judgment that he really wants to render, right? And so she very quickly sees that David is vacillating a little bit. And so what does she do? She says, now David, if you'll go ahead and make a judgment right now about this matter. If anything comes up, if there's any problem over your decision, guess what? Let it all be on me, and you won't be what? You won't be at fault in the matter. You'll be guiltless. Okay, so she's encouraging him, don't put it off, do what? Make a decision right now on this matter. Okay? That's what it appears to be going on. Okay? True or false? David assured the woman that no one would touch her. True. And the king said, whosoever saith aught unto thee, bring him to me, and he shall not touch thee any more. Now remember what the woman had said. There's many of her family members that are what? Putting a lot of pressure on her to kill her son, right? I mean, there's constantly. Say, we need to put him to death. We need to destroy him. We need to execute him. We need to get rid of him. He's killed your son. And David says what? Anybody else bother you about this? Do what? You let me know. We'll take care of that. Who did the woman not want to be able to destroy your son? The avenger of blood, yes. Then she said, I pray thee, let the king remember the Lord thy God, that thou wouldest not suffer the avengers of blood to destroy any more, lest they destroy my son. So now who does she make a request for? He's agreed to protect her against any more complaints. And now who does she specifically plead for? Yeah, the life of my son. Promise me that the avengers of blood cannot destroy my son. True or false? David could not promise that her son would be safe. That's false. And he said, as the Lord liveth, there shall not one hair of thy son fall to the earth. Who did he just protect? He just protected Absalom, didn't he? He just gave protection to Absalom. That's what he did when he made that statement right there. Okay? He didn't know that at the time. You know it? All he knew is I'm helping a poor woman. Okay, they're not going to bother you, and they're not going to touch a hair on your son. And all of a sudden, he just saved the life of who? Of Absalom, his son. Unbelievable. Pretty slick. After the woman was assured her son would not die, what did she request of David? Oh, yes. You know, she's already got his ear, right? Then the woman said, let thine handmaid, I pray thee, speak a word unto the Lord my king. I mean, he's already sucked in. This poor old woman. And she just wants what? One more thing. Folks, if a woman ever wants one more thing, you better say, I don't have time. You got to set your boundaries. True or false? David allowed the woman to speak on? True. And David said, say on. He just messed up. True or false? The woman charged David with being at fault. Folks, listen to this. And the woman said, wherefore then hast thou thought such a thing against the people of God? For the king doth speak this thing as one which is faulty. Uh-oh. Nathan has just bid again, hasn't he? Thou art the who? Thou art the man. If you take this position with regard to my son, then why in the world are you taking the position that you're taking against who? Against your son, Absalom. And it seems as though the nation of Israel were what? Aligned with Absalom. Folks, had Amnon done a pretty wicked deed? Yeah. Now, yes, it was revenge, wasn't it? And it doesn't seem maybe in our minds, but you know, apparently there was a lot of political stuff going on between these two sons. Okay? And so listen to what she says, the way she words it. Wherefore then hast thou sought such a thing against who? The people of God. The people of God were wondering, why doesn't he let Absalom come back? Why does he allow Absalom to be a part of the family again? You know, it's been a long time. It's been enough time. He just needs to forgive, forget, and bring Absalom home. Okay, so she puts a lot of pressure on him. Okay? In that the king doth not fetch home his banished. So see, he hasn't fetched home who? Absalom. Let's just read the text. For we must needs die as the water spilt on the ground, which cannot gather up again. Neither doth God respect any person. Yet doth he devise means that his banished shall not be expelled from him. Okay, folks, all she's saying is this. Okay, when a person dies, guess what? You can't bring him back. Absalom's killed Amnon. You will never bring him back. Okay, and even God is not a what? Respecter of persons. If somebody does bad, God, if the person asks for forgiveness, guess what God will do? He'll forgive his banished. Has He ever forgiven you of your sins and your iniquities and your transgressions, folks? Our sins and iniquities separate us from God. We go to God and ask forgiveness, and what does God do? He forgives the banished, doesn't He? So what she's saying is, if God will forgive people who sin against Him, why don't you forgive who? Absalom. Folks, let me ask you this. Did the story work? Yeah. It worked, didn't it? Did he eventually recognize what was going on here? Yeah. What did he ask? Is Joab's hand in this? Joab had his ear to the door in the next room listening. Okay? Because there's going to be a discussion ensues between who? Joab and the king in the next section, okay? So this deceit that they had, it worked, didn't it? And we'll talk about it more next week. Good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you.